go into the shared responsibility model. So we'll try and conclude with this topic. So remaining topic we will continue tomorrow, right? So shared responsibility model. So when it comes to cloud, it is not just about Amazon. It is not just about AWS team. Even we have equal responsibility from the customer side as well, right? As a customer, we have to take care of a lot of areas, right? So if you think if you are running your applications on infrastructure as a service, so as a customer, we need to take care of virtual machine, OS, the OS patching, the backup of your data, the runtime version upgrades, vulnerability management. So all these things are customer responsibility. When it comes to platform as a service, so upgrading the application, fixing the vulnerabilities, giving proper access to the data, giving handling the IAM controls, all these are with customer, right? In platform as a service. With software as a service, it is only the access part you need to take care of. Whatever the number of users you want to create, whatever the level of access you want to provide, you can just handle only those areas in software as a service. So in shared responsibility model, from access and from responsibility aspect, this is how it looks like. But security is the most important thing which you need to have a good understanding, right? In shared responsibility model. See, irrespective of all these model, one thing that you need to keep on your mind is this thing, right? As a customer, you are always responsible for the information, the data, the devices that are connecting to the application, the mobile device, or the laptops or the desktops or the whatever, right? So you have control on what are the devices that could connect to your application, and what are the different accounts you can create, what are the identities you can give access to. So the access control is with the customer, so the authorization is with the customer, the authentication control is with the customer, right? Irrespective of infrastructure as a model or platform as a model, software as a model, as a customer, as a consumer, we are responsible for the information, the data backup, accounts, identities, access control, and so on. But as a provider, AWS is responsible for taking care of the physical infrastructure. That includes server, storage, network, and all those things, right? UPS, power, cooling, infrastructure, everything. But the remaining layer, it all depends on customer to customer, I mean the model, right? If you are going with infrastructure as a model, the OS layer, the apps layer, the data layer, it's a shared responsibility. The network controls, the application controls will be between customer and the provider, right? So service provider is responsible for the physical infrastructure, right? The servers, storage, network, UPS, power, cooling infrastructure. So I can keep listing. This is a big list, right? So service provider is AWS. So AWS takes care of all this physical infrastructure irrespective of any model, and customer is responsible for all these things irrespective of any model. But the remaining areas, the in between areas, it all depends on model to model. Okay, so that is the basic understanding you should have. And coming to the security, which is the most important thing, and Muhammad has asked that question, right? So security and compliance is always a shared responsibility between the provider AWS and the consumer, which is us, right? The customer. And this model, like, let me just go with the slide. So there are two things: security of the cloud. So off the cloud means the cloud infrastructure. The responsibility is completely with the provider. AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud infrastructure, the hardware, the server, the storage, the databases, the networking, the backend availability zone, local zone, edge location, whatever they are providing, they have to take care of the security and compliance. Whereas the security in the cloud, in the application layer, in the operating system, network, whatever we are having, right? So that is something which customer has to take care of it. See, with this model, definitely the most important part is the operational burden, which is the infrastructure operations burden. That is completely offshore or offloaded to the provider here. So AWS takes care of the physical host, physical storage, physical networking, physical databases, all those patching, updates, the associated activities, the firmware, the firewall, all those things are taken care by AWS, the provider here. Customer, we have to take care of only the specific encryption activities, the firewall, which port should be open, which user should access, from which network we should access. So all those controls are still with the customer, right? So customer also have to take care of how we need to solution it, which ports we should open for our application, from which IP range we need to allow the access, and we should take care of the encryption of our operating system, the data and all those things, right? So AWS is responsible for security of the cloud, right? And customer is responsible for security in the cloud, which is mainly talking about let me just go to the next slide. So here the customer data, the platform, the application, the identity and access management, the firewall, from which port, which protocol, which IP range should access, the encryption, the traffic management. So all these are customer responsibilities, whereas AWS is responsible for the physical infrastructure plus these layers which are listed here, right? This is what we call it as shared responsibility model. If I mean, there are two way of looking at it, right? Physical encryption is taken care by AWS, whereas the OS level encryption or the disk level encryption or the client side encryption has to be taken care by the customer. And similarly, the physical server patching, physical server firmware upgrade, all those things has to be taken care by AWS. Whereas on the OS layer, the virtual machine layer, the instance level, right? Instance level patching, instance level updates, vulnerabilities has to be handled by the customer. So more or less, they have similar responsibilities, but at different layers, right? So I'll maybe listen to your questions. So any questions on this particular area, especially Mohammed, you have raised this question. Maybe I'll try to understand if you are looking for more clarity here, I can try and explain.
Stan, I have one question.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. See, this is like on demand, right? The compute process, whatever runs, especially that's the main feature of cloud.
Yep.
So suddenly, the customer is demanding with
Mhm.
some things like which may also be related to the security or something, or it's only the CPU, RAM, such compute devices that can be pay as you go on model.
Okay. So see, okay, pay as you go model. It's mainly yeah. As a solution architect, we have to be very very careful, right? Maybe I'll try to give an example around the same area which you started explaining about. Right. I will not call it as a benefit, but I will just call it as a careful stuff which we need to take care of. Okay, so when it comes to compute, right? When I say compute, you are referring to CPU, memory, the network cards, and whatever GPU or whatever, right? So these are all something which your application needs. And I see if you are provisioning some extra capacity, let's say 4 CPU and 16 GB of RAM. So over the period, maybe the 60 days, 30 days, you will check the consumption and then you will optimize it, right? Over the period, definitely you will increase or reduce based on the demand of your application. Either you might have oversized it and you might reduce it after a month. So obviously customer understands it, that you cannot always right size it at the very first time. So you can change it as and when there is an increase in demand, or if there is a the peak time goes away, you can just reduce it to optimize the cost. But when it comes to security, you have to be very careful there. The reason I say that, see, not every application has the same level of criticality or business requirement. Some application might be business critical, some application might not be, right? Some might application might be internet facing, some application might not be. See, let's
Mhm.
say you have an application which is internet facing. Obviously, you have to have more, you have to be more careful there. So you have to have services like web application firewall or some shield, and all those things can be used for guarding your application. Whereas if it is an intranet application, it is a decision making situation, right? Where you have to talk to the business owner and
Okay.
understand whether you really need those AWS web application firewall, which is more for the internet facing application. So if, I mean, even if they say there might be some internal intrusions or whatever, right? Maybe even there might be threats
Mm.
internal to the organization. So if they want to have a restriction,
Yes.
and if they want to have auditing, or if they want to have controls, authorization, even for the intranet facing application, you can go and enable those services. But again, cost comes into picture. what is the license,
Yes.
what is the feature cost going to be, right? And if you enable with just a button click, you might start paying hundreds of dollars every month,
Mhm.
right? So you have to be careful in two ways.
Yes.
One, you have to understand the business requirement. You need to understand how the application is going to be accessed, whether what kind of threat it has got, what kind of performance requirement it demands, and obviously when you're going for more controls, more security restrictions, then the performance also kind of gets changed, right? The performance will also get slightly impacted. So think about multiple aspects: performance, security, the criticality of the application, and then you can decide. I mean, you can all the time you can go and come back. See, there are few more
Mhm.
things you need to think about. For example, security. Let's say you have created a server without encryption. Okay, and for example,
Okay.
customer wants
Mm.
to encrypt that OS volume or the boot volume. Obviously, over the period, technologies will change and you can do the encryption on the fly. But then, as on date, if you want to enable encryption for your OS volume, you cannot just go and enable just like that, right? You have to
Mm.
take
Yes.
downtime, you have to clone that existing OS volume, and you have to recreate the new OS volume from that snapshot or from the
And
backup,
also,
and then you have to encrypt it, right?
mhm.
There is a lot of downtime and which business cannot accommodate. So security, you have to be very careful. Like even the 1 hour 2 hour downtime cannot be provided by some business application owners, right? So yeah, that's where solutioning you have to get better at. So we'll discuss. I mean, we are going to discuss the same thing
Yes.
again and
Okay.
again on each of the topic. But yeah, your question was really valid. Okay, so you have to be fully aware where exactly we can.
Mindful. Yes.
Yeah, we have to be very mindful.
Mm.
Yes.